Under the merciless sun, she was delivered as punishment and bait. Tied to a stone stake with wounded skin, torn laces, and intact dignity, Eleanor Grace became a symbol of the hatred between two worlds that should never have touched. But that same night, from the shadows emerged he, an Apache warrior marked by pain, with eyes that burned hotter than the sand beneath her feet. He freed her, and with a single gesture, ignited between them a forbidden, wild, and irreversible passion. Now, between pursuits, secrets, and a desire that neither can contain, each breath is a risk, each touch is a battle, and every choice could cost everything. If intense and unexpected love stories like this touch your heart, subscribe to this channel and comment on what you thought. Every day we post new plots that move and surprise. Discover now the romance that no one dared to live. The Montana Grasslands, 2024. A golden vastness that hid wounds as deep as the roots of the ancient oaks. It was there that worlds collided and shattered, where each step could be a challenge to justice or an invitation to destiny. When Eleanor Grace, daughter of one of the largest landowners in the Midwest, set foot on that red and arid land, she imagined that the only mark she would carry would be on her wounded pride. But she never suspected that a man could wound her in such a sweet and devastating way that no pride would survive. Grace Ranch stretched for endless miles, a property that swallowed the horizon like an insatiable monster. Jonathan Grace had built his empire on the bones of small producers, falsified land deeds, and expelled communities. His daughter had grown up hearing that the land belonged to them by right, that the invaders and bums needed to learn to respect order. But at 25, Eleanor had begun to question the stories her father told, especially after returning from Chicago with a journalism degree and a heart too restless to accept ready-made truths. It was on an August morning, when the sun still struggled against the morning mist, that Eleanor decided to get to know firsthand the lands that would one day bear her name. She rode alone across the property, ignoring the protests of Manny, the oldest ranch hand, who insisted that a family girl shouldn't go around there where dangerous people are. But Eleanor was as stubborn as her father and too curious to accept limits imposed by others. The fence dividing the ranch from the Palmetto settlement had been cut once again. Barbed wire lay twisted on the ground like dead snakes, and beyond the division, Eleanor could see the small wooden and brick houses, verdant gardens, children playing among the fruit trees. It was a stark contrast to the monotony of the ranch's pastures, where only cattle and grass reigned under the unforgiving sun. That's when she heard the screams. She jumped off her mare and ran toward the sound, her heart racing in her chest. On the other side of the downed fence, she saw a scene that made her stop midway. 5 uniformed men, ranch security guards she recognized, dragging a black woman by her hair toward a truck. The woman screamed, called for her children, while the men laughed and made obscene comments about what they would do with her away from the children's eyes. "Let her go!" The voice left Eleanor's throat before she could think. The men turned, surprised to recognize their boss's daughter. "Miss Eleanor?" Vince, the head of security, released the woman's hair with a yellow smile. "You shouldn't be here. It's dangerous." "I said let her go." Eleanor advanced, stepping on the fence wires as if stepping on serpents. "What are you doing?" "Following your father's orders, miss. This one's one of the squatters. We have to remove them from the ranch lands." Eleanor looked at the woman, who was now free but trembling like a leaf. She must have been about 40, her face marked by sun and work, but her eyes shone with a dignity that contrasted with the humiliation she had just suffered. "What squatters?" Eleanor asked, though deep down she already knew the answer. "This riffraff from the settlement, always coming over here, stealing our cattle, using our water. Your father told us to take care of it." That's when she heard the voice, deep, controlled, but carrying an authority that made all the men stiffen. "Get your dirty hands off Miss Connie." Eleanor turned and felt the world stop. The man emerging from the woods was tall, with broad shoulders that stretched his simple t-shirt, sun-bronzed skin, and close-cropped curly hair. But it was his eyes that held her, black, intense, full of a controlled anger that seemed to burn from within. He walked slowly, hands loose at his sides, but Eleanor noticed that the 5 security guards instinctively backed away. "Aaron," the woman murmured, and there was both relief and fear in her voice. "Go home, Connie." Take the children." He didn't take his eyes off the guards. "This is my business now." Vince pulled the gun from his waist, but Aaron didn't even blink. He just smiled. A smile that didn't reach his eyes and made Eleanor feel a shiver run down her spine. "Going to shoot in front of the boss's daughter, Vince? What kind of image will that give Mr. Grace?" That's when Aaron finally looked at her, and Eleanor felt as if the world had shifted on its axis. Those eyes penetrated her, measured her, judged her, and she had the strange sensation of being truly seen for the first time in her life. Not as the landowner's daughter, not as the heiress to the property, not as the family girl, but as a woman who, at that moment, was on the wrong side of the fence. "You must be Eleanor." His voice was softer now, almost a whisper, but there was something in that tone that made her stomach contract. "Jonathan's daughter." She nodded, unable to speak. "Beautiful." He took a step toward her, completely ignoring the armed men. "Too bad you carry the wrong blood." The phrase hit Eleanor like a slap. She felt her face heat up, a mixture of anger and something else she couldn't name. "I didn't choose my father." "No, but you choose your actions." Aaron stopped half a meter from her, close enough for her to smell his skin. Clean sweat, earth, something wild that made her want to breathe deeper. "And now? Will you let your goons finish the job?" Eleanor looked at Vince, who still held the gun. She looked at the woman trembling behind Aaron. She looked at the settlement houses, where other people were beginning to approach, men and women who observed her with a mixture of curiosity and distrust. "Put that gun away, Vince." Her voice came out firmer than she expected. "You all go back to headquarters. Now." "But Miss Eleanor, now." The men obeyed reluctantly, muttering among themselves. Vince holstered his gun, but not before giving Aaron a warning look. "This isn't over, you troublemaker." Aaron took 2 steps toward Vince, and this time the smile had completely disappeared. "Repeat what you said." The silence that followed was as tense as a wire about to snap. Vince swallowed hard and slunk away with the others, mumbling flimsy excuses. When they were alone, Eleanor, Aaron, and some settlement people watching from a distance, the air seemed to grow heavier. She realized she was breathing quickly, her heart beating as if she had run for miles. "You shouldn't have done that." Aaron observed her with an indecipherable expression. "Now you've become a problem for your own father." "Maybe I was already a problem anyway." He laughed, a low, husky sound that made something stir in her belly. "Maybe you are." Aaron took another step closer, and this time Eleanor didn't back away. "But what kind of problem? I haven't decided yet." She raised her chin, defiant. "And who are you to decide anything about me?" "Aaron Stone, leader of the Palmetto settlement, and from what it seems..." He extended his hand, pointing to the downed fence between them. "Your new neighbor." His hand was too close to her face. Eleanor could see the calluses on his palms, the scars on his fingers, the strength contained in those fists that had certainly fought for much more than land. She had a crazy impulse to touch that hand, to feel the rough texture of his skin against hers. Instead, she took a step back. "My father won't like knowing I talked to you. Your family never liked talking to us. They prefer to send their goons to speak for them." Aaron crossed his arms, and Eleanor couldn't help but notice how his t-shirt stretched across his chest muscles. "But you're different." "How can you be sure?" "Because you stopped them. Because you didn't run away when you saw me. And because..." He tilted his head, studying her face with an intensity that made her feel naked. "Because you're afraid of me. But it's not the kind of fear your family feels." Eleanor felt her face burn. It was true. She was afraid of him, but not the kind of fear people talked about. It was a more primitive, more dangerous fear. The fear of a woman faced with a man who could awaken things in her she didn't know existed. "I need to leave." "You do?" He didn't move to stop her, but he also didn't avert his gaze. "But you'll be back." It wasn't a question. It was a certainty that made her stomach contract again. "Why would I come back?" Aaron smiled again, but this time the smile reached his eyes, warming them like embers. "Because you want to understand. You want to know who we are, why we're here, why your father is so afraid of us." He took a step toward the downed fence. "And because you want to know what I'm going to do with you now that we've met." Eleanor mounted her mare with trembling hands. When she looked back, Aaron was still there, watching her leave. And she knew, with a certainty that haunted her the rest of the day, that he was right. She would return. Because on that August morning, in the middle of the red grassland, she had found something she didn't know she was looking for. And now that she had tasted that danger, that challenge, those eyes that truly saw her, she could no longer live pretending that nothing had changed. The war between the lands had gained a new battle. And this time, the battlefield was the heart of Eleanor Grace. When she arrived at the ranch headquarters, Jonathan was waiting for her on the porch, his face closed like a storm about to break. Vince had arrived before her, obviously. "We need to talk, girl." And Eleanor knew that her life had just split in two, before and after looking into Aaron Stone's eyes. And there was no going back. The confrontation with Jonathan was worse than Eleanor expected. Her father dragged her into the house as if she were a disobedient child, his small, hard eyes glinting with anger. The main house of Grace Ranch was imposing, with its noble wood beams and heavy furniture that seemed to crush her against the cold ceramic floor. But at that moment, all of it seemed dirty to her, stained by what she had discovered about her father's methods. "Have you completely lost your mind?" Jonathan slammed his fist on the dining table, making the crystal tinkle. "Humiliating my men in front of that riffraff, defending vagabonds who invade my property." "They weren't invading, Father. The woman was on the other side of the fence." "Don't come to me with technicalities, girl." Jonathan approached, his face red with fury. "These people don't respect fences, don't respect property, don't respect anything. And you, instead of supporting me, take their side?" Eleanor took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. But the image of Connie being dragged by her hair, the obscene laughter of the men, the fear in her eyes, all this burned in her memory like a hot iron. "I wasn't defending trespassing, Father. I was defending a woman from being humiliated." "Humiliated?" Jonathan laughed, a harsh sound. "You don't know what these people are capable of. Stealing cattle, destroying fences, invading property. And now that this Aaron has arrived, they've become even more daring." His name in her father's mouth made something stir in Eleanor's chest, a mixture of anxiety and heat that she couldn't control. "What do you know about him?" "I know he's an agitator, came from Oregon after causing problems there, graduated from some state university, head full of leftist ideas. Convinces these simple people they have a right to land that isn't theirs." Jonathan snorted. "But I'll deal with him. In a way he won't forget." The threatening tone in her father's voice made Eleanor freeze. "What kind of way?" "The kind that works with these people." Jonathan poured himself some whiskey, though it was still morning. "You don't worry about that. Worry about not bringing more shame to the family." Eleanor left the house feeling dirty, as if her father's words had stuck to her skin. She walked to the stable where she found Manny taking care of the horses. The old ranch hand had known her since childhood and had always been the most honest person on the ranch. "Manny, I need to ask you something." The man raised his tired eyes, full of scars from a lifetime in the sun. "Say it, Miss Ellie. Is it true that the settlement people steal cattle?" Manny sighed, running his hand through his graying hair. "Miss, I've worked this land for 40 years, seen a lot, and I can tell you that this theft story is more made up than real." "What do you mean?" "Cattle disappear, miss. They really do. Mountain lions take them, snakes bite them, disease kills them. But it's easier to blame the poor than to accept the loss." Manny continued brushing the horse, avoiding looking at her. "And sometimes cattle disappear because someone wants them to disappear, to justify other things." Eleanor felt a shiver run down her spine. "What other things?" "Things that a family girl shouldn't know." But Eleanor was no longer just the family girl. Since she had looked into Aaron Stone's eyes, something had awakened in her, a need for truth that hurt like an open wound. She spent the following days restless, unable to concentrate on anything. At night, lying in her single bed, she relived every second of the encounter at the fence. His deep voice, the way he had observed her, the certainty with which he said she would return. And the worst part, she knew he was right. It was on a Friday, when her father traveled to Helena to handle business, that Eleanor made her decision. She wore old jeans and a simple blouse, tied her hair back, and saddled her mare. This time it was no accident that she rode toward the Palmetto settlement. The fence was still down. On the other side, she could see organized plantations, small, colorful houses, children playing in the red earth. It was a stark contrast to the monotony of the ranch's pastures. Here there was life, movement, color. It seemed more like a home than the big house where she had grown up. "You came back." Aaron's voice behind her made her jump. He had appeared out of nowhere, as if he were part of the earth itself. This time he wore a faded blue t-shirt that enhanced the color of his skin and carried a hoe over his shoulder. There was dirt stuck to his muscular arms, and Eleanor had to make an effort not to stare. "You said I would." "I did." He approached the fence, resting the hoe on the ground. "Didn't think it would be so quick. Maybe I'm impatient. Or maybe you're brave." His eyes traveled over her from top to bottom, and Eleanor felt heat rise up her neck. "Or very foolish." "Why foolish?" "Because your father finding out you're here is the least of your problems now." There was something in his tone that alerted her, a danger that went beyond the obvious tension between them. "What do you mean?" Aaron looked around, as if checking if they were alone. Then he jumped over the downed fence with an agility that impressed her. Suddenly he was beside her, so close that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "I mean, things are heating up around here, and you being associated with me isn't safe." "What kind of things?" Instead of answering, he extended his hand. "Come, if you really want to understand, you need to see with your own eyes." Eleanor looked at the outstretched hand. It was large, calloused, with scars that told stories she didn't know. Touching it would be crossing a line from which there might be no return. But since when did she care about lines? She intertwined her fingers with his. The touch was like an electric shock. His skin was warm and rough, and there was a contained strength in those fingers that made her tremble. Aaron seemed to feel the same thing, because he squeezed her hand a little harder before pulling her toward the settlement. "Do you ride?" "Since I was a child." "Then let's go on horseback. It's farther than it looks." He whistled softly, and from behind a bush appeared a bay horse, saddled and ready. Aaron mounted first, then extended his hand to help her up behind him. Eleanor hesitated only a second before accepting. When she settled behind him, her thighs against his, her chest pressed against his broad back, she felt as if the world had caught fire. They rode in silence along the settlement's dirt paths. Eleanor tried to concentrate on the landscape, the simple but well-maintained houses, the verdant gardens, the people who greeted them with smiles. But it was impossible to ignore the proximity of Aaron's body. His scent, a mixture of clean sweat and earth, invaded her like a drug. Each movement of the horse pressed her more against him, and she began to wonder if he was doing this on purpose. They stopped at a small elevation that overlooked a more remote part of the property. Aaron dismounted first and helped her down, his large hands holding her by the waist a little longer than necessary. "Look over there." He pointed to a valley between low hills. Eleanor followed the direction of his finger and felt her stomach turn. There were scars on the land, marks of heavy machinery, felled trees forming piles. And in the midst of it all, uniformed men, not the ranch security guards, but something worse. Men with military equipment, heavy weapons, official cars. Police? Worse. Militia specialized in evictions. Your father hired a company from Bozeman. Aaron approached her, his voice low and tense. "They're preparing to remove us from here, and they won't be gentle." Eleanor felt her legs weaken. She knew stories of violence in land conflicts, but they had always seemed distant, abstract. Seeing them take real form, with faces and weapons, made her feel sick. "How many families live here?" 123, 340 people, 82 children. He had the numbers on the tip of his tongue, and Eleanor realized that each number represented a responsibility that weighed on his shoulders. "Why are you telling me this?" Aaron turned to her, and for the first time since they had met, she saw vulnerability in those black eyes. "Because you're the only person who can stop this." "Me? How?" "By talking to your father, convincing him to leave us in peace." Eleanor laughed, but it was a bitter sound. "You don't know my father. He doesn't listen to me. Not since my mother died." "Then maybe it's time to make him listen." There was an intensity in Aaron's voice that made her look more carefully at him. And that's when she realized that this wasn't just about land. It was personal. "There's something you're not telling me." Aaron looked away, his jaw tense. "There always is." "Aaron." She touched his arm, feeling the muscles contract under her hand. "Tell me." He was silent for so long that she thought he wasn't going to answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was loaded with a pain she hadn't expected. "I knew your mother." The world stopped. Eleanor felt as if the ground had opened beneath her feet. "What?" "Not personally, but I knew her work." Aaron turned to her, and now there was a deep sadness in his eyes. Helen Grace, social worker. She worked with settled families in Oregon. Eleanor felt tears burning her eyes. Her mother had died when she was 15 in a car accident. Jonathan never spoke about the work she did, always changed the subject when Eleanor asked. She helped people like you?" "She helped everyone. It didn't matter if you were a rancher or landless. She believed that land should serve to feed people, not to accumulate power." Aaron took a deep breath. "My mother was one of the families she worked with. Before she died, she talked a lot about Mrs. Helen, said she was a fair woman." Tears began to roll down Eleanor's face. Suddenly so many things made sense. Her father's change after her mother's death, his constant anger, the harshness with which he treated employees. "Is that why you don't hate me?" "Because of her." Aaron took a step toward her, raising his hand as if to touch her face, but stopping halfway. "I should hate you. You represent everything I fight against." His voice was hoarse, loaded with emotion. "But when I look at you, I see her. The same restlessness, the same desire for justice, the same pain in your eyes." Eleanor couldn't contain herself. She stepped forward, eliminating the distance between them. Now they were so close she could feel his breath against her face. "Aaron, this is madness," he whispered, but didn't move away. "You know that, don't you?" "I know. If your father finds out, to hell with my father." And then Aaron did what they both knew would happen from the first moment they looked at each other. He held her face between his hands and kissed her. The kiss was desperate, hungry, as if they were drowning and this was air. His hands tangled in her hair, pulling her closer, and Eleanor lost herself in the sensation. He tasted of earth and sweat and something wild that made her moan against his mouth. When they finally separated, they were both breathing with difficulty. "This changes everything." Aaron rested his forehead against hers. "I know. It won't be easy. Nothing worth having is easy." He smiled, the first true smile she had seen on those lips. "Your mother would say the same thing." They returned in silence, but now the silence was loaded with promises and dangers. When they reached the downed fence, Aaron helped her mount her mare, his hands lingering longer on her waist than necessary. "Eleanor." "Yes?" "Be careful. Your father isn't the only enemy you have now." She rode back to the ranch with the taste of him still in her mouth and her heart beating erratically. She knew she had crossed a line from which there was no return. She knew the next few days would be decisive, that she would have to choose between family and heart, between safety and justice. But when she arrived at the main house and saw her father's car parked in front, he had returned early from his trip, she knew her choices would have to be made sooner than she imagined. Jonathan was waiting for her in the living room, not alone. Beside him was a man she didn't know, in an expensive suit with a hard face. And on the table between them, photographs that made her blood freeze. Photos of her and Aaron, talking at the fence, riding together, kissing on the hilltop. "Sit down." Her father's voice was dangerously low. "We have a lot to talk about." And Eleanor knew that the war had officially begun. The photographs were spread out on the mahogany table like cards in a deadly game. Eleanor recognized each moment captured by the invasive lens, her hands intertwined with Aaron's, the passionate kiss on the hilltop, their bodies pressed together as they rode together. Each image was a death sentence for any chance of peace between her and her father. Jonathan said nothing for long minutes. He just drummed his fingers on the table, his face red with an anger that seemed about to explode. The man beside him was different from anyone Eleanor had seen on the ranch. 50s, impeccable gray suit, graying hair combed back, blue eyes cold as ice. He had the aspect of someone who was accustomed to resolving problems in ways that didn't appear in any law book. "Do you know Mr. Richard Carter?" Jonathan finally broke the silence, indicating the man. "Specialist in property security." Carter smiled, but it was a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Pleasure, Miss Grace. I've heard a lot about you." "I can't say the same." Eleanor forced herself to keep her voice firm, though her legs were trembling. "Mr. Carter came from Washington specially to help us with our trespasser problem." Jonathan picked up one of the photographs, studying it as if it were criminal evidence. Imagine my surprise when he showed me that the problem was closer to home than I imagined. Carter stood up, walking to the window that overlooked the pastures. Land conflicts are delicate, miss. They often involve infiltration, emotional manipulation, use of innocent people as pawns. His voice was polite, almost cordial, but there was a subtle poison in the words. Young idealists are particularly vulnerable to these methods. Nobody manipulated me. No? Carter turned, walking back toward her with measured steps. An experienced man with higher education, a charismatic leader. It wouldn't be difficult to convince an inexperienced young woman that she was fighting for a just cause. Eleanor felt anger burn in her chest. You don't know anything about me. I know you're Helen Grace's daughter. The mention of her mother's name made Eleanor freeze. Carter smiled, satisfied with the reaction. Yes, I knew your mother. A idealistic woman. Caused some problems in Oregon before moving here. My mother helped people. Your mother interfered in legitimate business, just as you're doing now. Carter returned to the chair, crossing his legs with studied elegance. The difference is that she learned when to stop. You apparently didn't inherit that prudence. Jonathan slammed his fist on the table, making the crystal tinkle. Enough talk. Eleanor, you're going to tell me exactly what that bum Aaron wants from you. And don't come to me with a love story because I wasn't born yesterday. Eleanor looked at the photographs again. In one of them, she could see the intensity in Aaron's face when he kissed her, the raw passion that existed between them. It wasn't pretense. It wasn't manipulation. It was real. And it hurt like an open wound to know she could never explain this to her father. He doesn't want anything from me. Lie! Jonathan stood up, the chair creaking. A man like that doesn't waste time with a rancher's daughter unless he has a plan. He knows you're my daughter, knows he can use you against me. Or perhaps, Carter intervened, his voice dangerously soft. Perhaps the young lady is passing information to him. Security routines, personnel movements, family plans. The accusation hit Eleanor like a slap. She stood up abruptly, the chair falling backward. How dare you? I dare because I've seen this before. Carter remained seated, unperturbed. Young women revolting against their families, in love with lost causes, willing to betray their own to impress revolutionary lovers. You don't know what you're talking about, don't I? Then explain to me why, 3 days after your first meeting with this Aaron, the trespassers cut our fence exactly at the most vulnerable point of the property. Why, the night after your second meeting, 2 head of cattle disappeared precisely from the area you know best. Carter's words hit Eleanor like bullets. She knew they were coincidences, but explained that way, they seemed irrefutable evidence of betrayal. I never. And today, when you returned from your romantic meeting on the hill, our men found this on the fence. Carter took an object from his pocket, placing it on the table. It was a small GPS tracker, the kind used to monitor cattle. Someone is mapping our movements, Miss Grace. Someone with intimate access to the ranch. Eleanor felt the world spin. She knew she hadn't placed that tracker, but she also knew that no one would believe her. She looked at her father, searching for some sign of doubt, some spark of the trust they once had. Jonathan observed her as if she were a stranger. 26 years. His voice was hoarse with pain and anger. For 26 years I raised you, gave you the best of everything, and you stabbed me in the back because of a bum you've known for a week. Father, you have to listen to me. I don't have to listen to anything, Jonathan shouted, his face purple with fury. You betrayed this family, betrayed everything I built. Tears began to roll down Eleanor's face, not just of sadness, but of anger. Anger at being judged without a chance for defense, of being accused of crimes she hadn't committed, of seeing her father choose to believe a stranger instead of trusting her. I would never betray this family, but this family never cared about what I thought or felt. Oh, now I'm the villain, Jonathan laughed bitterly. After everything I did for you? After everything you did for yourself. Eleanor wiped away the tears with the back of her hand. This ranch, this land, this power, none of it is for me, Father. It's for your vanity. The silence that followed was as tense as a wire about to snap. Carter observed the exchange with professional interest, like someone analyzing an experiment giving results. Very touching. Carter finally spoke. But unfortunately, we don't have time for family therapy. Mr. Grace, we need to make practical decisions. Jonathan composed himself, straightening his wrinkled shirt. What kind of decisions? First, your daughter needs to be contained until we resolve the situation at the settlement. We can't risk more information leaks. Contained how? At home, under constant supervision, without access to phone, internet, or horses. Eleanor felt as if the air had been sucked from her lungs. You're talking about imprisoning me? We're talking about protecting you. Jonathan avoided looking directly at her. From yourself and your stupid decisions. And second, Carter continued, we need to accelerate the operation at the settlement. Each day that passes gives them more time to organize. What operation? Eleanor asked, but she already feared the answer. The removal of the trespassers. Carter spoke as if discussing the removal of trash. Tuesday morning, before dawn. Tuesday? That's 3 days from now. Time enough for them to pack their things and leave voluntarily. If they don't leave, Carter shrugged, we'll use necessary methods. Eleanor felt panic rise in her throat. She remembered the children playing in the red earth, the families working their small plantations, Connie with her frightened eyes. And she thought of Aaron, not knowing a storm was approaching. Father, you can't do this. I can and I will. This land is mine, registered in the county records. They are on private property illegally. There are legal processes. Justice is slow. Carter intervened. And meanwhile, the invasion consolidates. It's better to resolve now, definitively. Eleanor looked at her father, searching for some sign of the man who had raised her, who had carried her on his shoulders when she was a child, who cried at her mother's funeral. But all she saw was a stranger, blinded by greed and wounded pride. If you do this, I'll never forgive you. If I don't do this, I'll never forgive myself. Jonathan finally faced her. Manny will keep an eye on you until Monday. After that, you decide if you want to continue being my daughter, or if you prefer to chase lost causes. Carter stood up, smoothing his suit. Well, I think our conversation was productive. Mr. Grace, my men will be positioned before dawn on Tuesday. The operation will begin at 5 in the morning. And if they resist? Carter's smile was chilling. We hope they don't, but we're prepared for any eventuality. When Carter left, Eleanor was alone with her father in the room that suddenly seemed too small to contain all the anger and sadness she felt. Father? No. Jonathan raised his hand. I don't want to hear anything else. You made your choice when you went to meet that man. Now deal with the consequences. Eleanor spent that night locked in her room, with Manny standing guard on the porch. But it wasn't the fear of imprisonment that kept her awake until dawn. It was the image of Aaron and the settlement families, not knowing they had only 3 days before the storm broke over their heads. The next morning, when Manny brought breakfast, she tried to convince him to help her. Manny, you've known me since I was little. You know I wouldn't do anything to harm the family. The old ranch hand sighed, avoiding looking at her. I know, Miss Ellie, but I also know that love makes people do foolish things. It's not foolish to want to prevent violence. Maybe not, but it's not me you need to talk to. Who then? Manny was silent for a moment, then approached the window, checking if there was no one nearby. Your mother left some things stored in the attic. Things your father never touched. His voice was low, conspiratorial. Maybe you should take a look. What kind of things? Documents, letters, things about her work in Oregon. Manny turned to her, his eyes sad. Things that might explain why she died on that dirt road in the middle of nowhere. Eleanor felt her heart race. What are you saying? I'm saying that a car accident on a straight road with good weather, experienced driver, that's not an accident. That's something else. The revelation hit Eleanor like lightning. Suddenly, many pieces began to fit together. Her father's radical change after her mother's death, his refusal to talk about her work, his growing hostility against any form of social assistance. Manny, are you saying my mother was killed? I'm saying you need to discover the truth. And that maybe that truth will change everything you think about this whole story. At night, when the house was silent, Eleanor went up to the attic for the first time in years. Among dusty boxes and old furniture, she found a leather suitcase that she recognized as her mother's. Inside, letters, documents, reports on land conflicts in Oregon. And at the bottom of the suitcase, a letter addressed to her, with instructions to be opened only if someday you need to know the truth. With trembling hands, Eleanor opened the yellowed envelope. My dear daughter, if you are reading this, it's because the consequences of my choices have finally reached our family. There are things about your father you need to know. Things about me you may not understand now, but that one day will make sense. The letter revealed a devastating truth. Helen had discovered a scheme of land grabbing involving Jonathan and businessmen from Washington. Indigenous lands being invaded, falsified documents, families expelled with violence. She had gathered evidence, was ready to denounce when she died. Your father is not a monster, Eleanor. He's a man who lost his way, who chose money over justice. But there is still time for him to redeem himself, if someone he loves can show him the way back. The letter ended with a phrase that made Eleanor cry. If one day you fall in love with someone who fights for the land, know that it is not coincidence. It's destiny giving us a second chance to do the right thing. On Sunday morning, when Manny came to check on her, Eleanor had made her decision. I need to get out of here. Miss, they're going to attack Tuesday morning. I need to warn Aaron. Your father will kill me if I let you leave. My father will have to choose between killing me and doing the right thing. Eleanor showed her mother's letter. And you're going to help me give him that chance? Manny read the letter in silence, tears running down his wrinkled face. Mrs. Helen always knew this would go bad. Then help me finish what she started. That night, when the moon was hidden behind clouds, Manny discreetly disabled the house alarm system. Eleanor left through the bedroom window, using the fire hose to descend to the garden. She ran through the darkness toward the settlement, her heart beating like a war drum. She had just over 48 hours to change the course of a tragedy that had been building for years. And she knew that when the sun rose on Tuesday, nothing would ever be the same again. The run through the darkness of the grassland was the longest of Eleanor's life. Each shadow seemed to hide dangers. Each noise made her imagine that her father's security guards had discovered her escape. But it was urgency that moved her, the certainty that every minute lost could mean lives at risk. The words of her mother's letter echoed in her mind like a desperate prayer. There was time for redemption, but only if someone had the courage to fight for it. When she finally reached the Palmetto settlement, it was already past midnight. The houses were plunged into silence, only a few windows faintly illuminated by candles or weak lamps. Eleanor ran toward Aaron's house, which Connie had pointed out to her in a previous conversation. A simple brick and wood construction, with a small porch where medicinal plants grew. She knocked on the door urgently, her heart racing not just from the effort of running, but from the anticipation of seeing Aaron again. When the door opened, he was wearing only jeans, his bare chest still marked by the pillow, his hair disheveled. For a moment she forgot the urgency and just observed him. The golden skin in the weak lamplight, the muscles defined by hard work, the sleepy eyes that quickly became alert upon seeing her. Eleanor? His voice was hoarse with sleep and surprise. What are you doing here? How did you... We need to talk. Now. She pushed the door, entering the simple house. They're planning to attack you Tuesday morning, at 5 o'clock. The effect of the words was immediate. Aaron straightened completely, all sleepiness disappearing from his eyes. Are you sure? My father hired a specialized militia, a man named Carter, from Washington. They brought military equipment. Eleanor held his arms, feeling the muscles contract under her touch. Aaron, they're talking about using necessary methods if you resist. Aaron ran his hands over his face, his mind clearly working fast to process the information. How many men? I don't know. But I saw trucks, heavy equipment. It's not just the ranch security guards. Damn. Aaron began pacing the small living room, agitation making his movements faster. We need to gather everyone. Start evacuating the children and elderly. Evacuation? Eleanor felt her stomach contract. You're going to abandon everything? Aaron stopped walking, looking at her with an expression that mixed pain and determination. Eleanor, these people have entire families here. Children. I can't risk turning this into a massacre. But you have rights. There are legal processes. Rights don't stop bullets. Aaron approached her, holding her face between his hands. And you? Does your father know you're here? He locked me in the house. I escaped. Eleanor covered his hands with hers. Aaron, there are things you need to know. About my mother, about my father. Later. He kissed her quickly, but it was a kiss loaded with farewell and fear. Now I need to take care of my people. The next hour was a whirlwind of activity. Aaron woke the community leaders, and in less than 30 minutes the small settlement school was full of men and women with tense faces, sleepy children in their laps. Eleanor stayed in a corner, watching Aaron explain the situation with a calmness she knew was forced. "It's not fair." Connie's voice cut through the general murmur. "We've worked this land for 3 years. We planted, built, raised our children here." "I know, Connie, but we can't fight against military equipment with hoes and scythes. So we'll die like cowards?" The voice came from an older man with graying hair. "I've been expelled from land twice. I won't run a third time." Murmurs of agreement ran through the group. Eleanor saw the anguish on Aaron's face. He was torn between the responsibility of protecting the families and the need to fight for what was rightfully theirs. That's when she stood up. "May I speak?" The silence that followed was tense. All eyes turned to her, the enemy's daughter, the woman who had appeared out of nowhere bringing news of war. Aaron nodded, although she could see the concern in his eyes. "You don't have to fight alone." Eleanor took her mother's letter from her pocket. "My mother gathered evidence that the lands in this region were illegally grabbed. Falsified documents, bribery of public officials, violent expulsion of Native American communities." Her voice gained strength as she spoke. "She died because of this evidence, but it still exists." "What kind of evidence?" asked Aaron. "False contracts, recorded conversations, bank transfers." Eleanor felt tears burning her eyes. "My mother discovered that half of the lands of Grace Ranch were illegally acquired, including this one here." The murmur in the group became louder, more agitated. "Where is this evidence?" asked the gray-haired man. "In a law office in Helena, where my mother deposited everything before she died. She left clear instructions. If anything happened to her, the documents should be delivered to the federal prosecutor's office." "And why weren't they?" Eleanor took a deep breath, preparing herself for the truth that hurt like an open wound. "Because the lawyer was afraid. My father has a lot of power, many connections, but..." She looked directly at Aaron. "If there's a formal complaint of violence against the settlement, the prosecutor will be obliged to investigate, and then the documents will come to light. Are you suggesting we let them attack?" Connie's voice was incredulous. "I'm suggesting that we document everything. Film, photograph, have witnesses, and resist peacefully." Eleanor looked at the faces around her. "Turn this into a national cause. Make the whole country see what's happening here." Aaron was watching her with an intensity that made her tremble. "This is very risky. If things get out of control, they're already out of control." Eleanor approached him. "The question now is whether we'll let my father and men like Carter dictate the terms of the fight, or if we'll show America who the real villains of this story are." The debate that followed lasted hours. When the sun began to rise on the horizon, tinting the sky red like a promise of blood, a decision had been made. There would be no evacuation, but there would also be no unnecessary violence. Each family would have cell phone cameras ready, contacts with national press already alerted, lawyers from human rights organizations on the way. Eleanor spent the last hours before the confrontation by Aaron's side, helping to organize the peaceful resistance. When they finally had a moment alone, on the porch of his house while observing the movement in the settlement, he pulled her into his arms. "You know that after today nothing will be the same, don't you?" "I know." She nestled against his chest, feeling the firm beats of his heart. "My father will never forgive me for this. And you? Will you be able to live with the consequences?" Eleanor raised her face to look at him. In those deep black eyes, she saw the future she wanted. Difficult, uncertain, but honest. "I can live with any consequence, as long as it's by your side." Aaron kissed her then, a desperate kiss full of promises they might not be able to keep. When they separated, both knew they were sealing a pact that went beyond love. It was a commitment to justice, whatever the cost. At 5 o'clock in the morning, exactly as predicted, the sound of heavy engines echoed through the settlement. Military trucks, police cars, uniformed men descending with riot equipment. In front of everyone, Jonathan, Grace, and Carter, the face of the former a mask of cold determination. But when they reached the center of the settlement, they didn't find armed resistance. Instead, They found entire families sitting in front of their houses, children in their laps, singing songs of peace. Cell phone cameras recording everything, journalists who had arrived during the night, lawyers with legal documents, and in the middle of everyone, Eleanor and Aaron, holding hands, waiting. Jonathan's face transformed when he saw his daughter. For a moment, she saw in him not the powerful rancher, but just a wounded and betrayed father. "Eleanor, get out of there now." "No, father. This is your last chance." "No, this is yours." Eleanor took a folder of documents from inside her blouse, copies of the evidence her mother had gathered, which she had sought in Helena during the night with the help of human rights contacts. "Mother left this for you, father. A chance to do the right thing." Jonathan looked at the documents as if they were venomous snakes. Carter, beside him, was clearly nervous about the presence of the press. "Mr. Grace, we need to proceed with the operation." "Quiet." Jonathan didn't take his eyes off his daughter. "What documents are these?" "Falsified contracts, bribes, murders." Eleanor's voice was firm, but there were tears in her eyes. "Everything Mother discovered before she died. Everything you did to build this empire. Your mother died in an accident. My mother was murdered because she discovered the truth." Eleanor took a step forward, Aaron by her side. "And now you can choose. Continue being the man who killed her, or go back to being the man she loved." The silence that followed was broken only by the wind whispering among the trees. Jonathan looked at his daughter as if seeing her for the first time, and Eleanor could see the battle happening behind those eyes. Paternal love fighting against years of greed and wounded pride. Carter, realizing the situation was escaping control, signaled for the men to advance. "Enough theater. Let's remove these trespassers." That's when Jonathan did something that surprised everyone. He raised his hand, stopping the armed men. "Wait. Mr. Grace, I said wait." Jonathan turned to Carter, and for the first time since he arrived, his voice was loaded with real authority. "This operation is canceled." "What?" Carter was incredulous. "We have signed contracts that have just been nullified." Jonathan walked toward his daughter, each step seeming to cost him years of life. "Helen, your mother. She tried to warn me, said I was losing myself, that I was becoming someone she didn't recognize." Tears now flowed freely down Eleanor's face. "Father, I didn't listen, and because of that she died." Jonathan stopped a meter from his daughter, his face marked by a deep pain. "I won't lose you too." Carter was red with anger. "Mr. Grace, this is a mistake. These documents can destroy everything we've built." "Then maybe it's time to build something new." Jonathan looked at Aaron, and there was something like respect in that look, something my wife would be proud of. What happened next was like a miracle. Jonathan publicly announced that he recognized the settlement's right to the lands, that he would open an investigation into the irregularities in the ranch's documentation, and that he would establish a compensation fund for the families harmed over the years. Carter and his men left furious, threatening lawsuits, but Jonathan just smiled. The first true smile Eleanor had seen on her father's face in years. "Let them sue. I have better lawyers." 6 months later, Eleanor and Aaron were married in a simple ceremony at the settlement school, with families from both sides present. Jonathan had fulfilled all his promises, transforming half of Grace Ranch into community area and creating cooperatives that benefited both former employees and settlers. The prosecutor's investigation revealed a corruption network that extended across 3 states, resulting in the arrest of dozens of people, including Carter, who tried to flee to Canada but was captured at the border. On the night of the wedding, while the guests danced to the sound of a fiddle, Eleanor and Aaron moved away to a more private place, where they could see the lights of the settlement shining like stars on the red earth. "Do you think your mother would have approved?" Aaron asked, embracing her from behind. "I think she knew this would happen." Eleanor leaned back against him, feeling the peace she had found after so much conflict. Her letter, "It was as if she knew that one day I would find someone who would teach me to fight for the right things. And I found someone who taught me that sometimes it's worth believing in people's redemption." They stayed there, embraced under the starry sky of the grassland, knowing there was still much work ahead. The settlement was just beginning. There were other fights for social justice waiting, other challenges to face, but they also knew that they would face everything together. Eleanor had chosen love over safety, justice over privilege. Aaron had learned that not all enemies were irreversible, that sometimes change could come from the most unexpected places. And Jonathan, watching his daughter dance with her husband across the courtyard, finally understood what Helen had tried to teach him, that true wealth was not in the land one owned, but in the peace one built. The grassland around them whispered stories of struggle and reconciliation, of love that overcomes hate, of families that recreate themselves when they choose forgiveness. And on the red earth where it all began, two people from opposite worlds had found a common future, built on the solid foundations of truth and justice. The war had ended, love had won, and the land, finally, belonged to those who truly loved it.